A catastrophic illness that requires long-term medical care can decimate an individual's finances. A private room in a skilled nursing home in Tennessee costs an average of nearly $73,000 per year. Statistics show that 70% of people over 65 will need some type of long-term care in their lives. Long-term care insurance has been on the market for almost 4 decades, but only about 8 million people have purchased these policies. Should you? Let's take a look at the fine print of long-term care insurance. In my research, I've seen figures that say that people reaching age 65 today have better than a 50-50 chance of needing long-term care in the future. And of course, as I've indicated, long-term care is expensive, very expensive.
It is.
So what are the options for consumers to pay for long-term care?
The real question is, how do you handle it in the future? And there's really 4 options. You can depend on family, you can depend on the government, you can dip into your own asset base, or you can have insurance to cover that need.
Now, when you say family, we're talking about family taking care of you for a period of time. But then Medicare and Medicaid, talk about those two for a moment.
Medicare is what most people handle after, or have after their age 65, but what people don't realize, Chris, is that it doesn't cover non-medical care, which is what we're really talking about. So it'll cover physical therapy and such, but it doesn't cover companionship or standby care to help mama shower or dress or feed herself, turn her in bed, make sure she doesn't stumble. So that's non-medical care that Medicare does not cover.
And most people don't realize that Medicare doesn't cover that.
They don't realize it.
Medicaid does, but it comes at a cost.
A huge cost. You have to spend down your assets to virtually nothing in order to qualify.
But you also mentioned self-insuring?
In folks, you know, if they don't have a plan in place, then they're forced to dip into their own assets. And that's called self-insuring. So when the time comes and they need care or they need to be moved into an assisted living community, they have to start paying for it somehow, and it comes out of their assets. And many people are shocked and amazed at how quickly that asset base can be drained.
Well, when you're talking, you know, $5,000 to $7,000 a month for a skilled nursing home, it drains it very quickly.
Very quickly.
Let's talk about long-term care insurance. First of all, just give me the basics of how it works.
You create a plan, which, and so what it does is it covers, let me just talk about what it covers. It covers everything from home care all the way to hospice and everything in between, if that plan is done properly, okay? And you pay a certain amount every month in exchange for a certain amount of coverage every month. And that's it in simple terms.
But it's not that simple. It's a relatively complex policy, correct?
The plan design can be complex, correctly. So you need a professional to help guide you in that plan design.
Now, are there health qualifications to qualify for a policy?
Yes, you have to go through medical underwriting, much like you would through getting life insurance, for instance. Although with life insurance, they use criteria that involves mortality risk. With long-term care, they use criteria that revolves around morbidity risk. So, and it's becoming increasingly harder to get it.
Are there health qualifications when it comes to qualifying for the benefits?
Okay, again, around that plan design, there's typically an elimination period, which you can look at as a deductible, and it typically is 90 days. So after...
Now, elimination period means a time where the insurance company doesn't pay.
It's a waiting period.
It's a waiting period.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Okay, but to qualify, once that period's over, to qualify for care, you have to be certified that you need help with 2 of the activities of daily living, 2 out of the 6, and those are, I like to go in order, transferring, getting out of bed, bathing, dressing, eating, cognitive care, countenance. Okay? So, and then I said cognitive, but those are the 6 activities of daily living. So if you can't perform 2 of those out of the 6, then your insurance would kick in.
An average cost. I know it may be difficult because every policy, every person is different. But can you give me a rough average that there might be for someone, an average buyer of a policy?
People in their 60s can fit into a comfortable plan for around $200 a month.
And I know, though, that women pay more than men. Why is that?
They do, because if you look at every assisted living community or nursing home in the area, it's populated mostly by women. They outlive us men. And so they're the ones that carry the most risk for the insurance company.
Now, I presume the younger you buy a policy, the cheaper the premium. But can you be too old to buy a policy?
Well, that's a great question. It all turns around health. You could be 50 and not qualify because of bad health. You can be 80 and still qualify because of good health. And I've written people well into their 70s.
And of course, you will be at a higher premium at that age, correct?
But it all averages out, because if you get it younger, you're going to be paying for a longer period of time. So it does average out.
Mm-hmm. The big question, I guess, is like any insurance, whether you're insuring your home or your car, there are different levels of coverage. You have to make the decision of what to buy. How do you go about determining how much coverage you need in long-term care?
Yeah, well, when I sit down with folks and I counsel them, we first try to determine what their attitude towards insurance is and how much of that risk do they want to carry themselves or pass on to the insurance company. And most people have a very conservative view, but some want to transfer all the risk, Chris, and so they say, I never want to think about it again. But I don't think that's very wise. I mean, you really have to take a look. And then beyond that, let's look at your assets and what your ability to self-insure is and how much of those assets you want to protect. And then we find a happy medium, I think, is really the normal. Most people go that route. I've never known anybody who needed care to say, I wish I had less. They're always grateful for something.
So that would be the message. Work within your own budget. Find out what your budget is, what you're comfortable with, and then buy that level of care.
And your risk tolerance as well.
Yeah, if you're interested in long-term care insurance. You know, one of the things, speaking of interest in long-term care, one of the things that surprised me in my research was that only about 8% of Americans actually have these policies. Why such a low number when the actual risk is great?
Well, it's not top of mind for most people. I suspect that those people that do have that coverage have had an experience, either personally or through a family friend or coworker, where they've seen the damage that's been done to that family, to the caregiver, to their assets, and now it's top of mind, and so they go out looking for it.
It becomes top of mind a little late.
It's a little late at that time, but at least it does kick in. So.
Well, what's your best advice when you're faced with having to make that decision, whether it's a decision that's forced upon you in the short term or whether you're actually thinking ahead? What's your best advice for consumers to deal with long-term care?
Yeah, don't wait until you're in crisis mode. Don't wait until you pick up the phone and have to ask, what do I do with mama? Which is a very common question I get. Have a plan in place, whether it's family or dependency on a government agency, or if you're going to self-insure, have money set aside and earmarked for that, or get proper coverage in the form of insurance. But have a plan in place well before you think you're going to need it. And the average person is in their early 80s before they need that kind of care. So plan ahead.
Let's close out with a look toward the future, because in less than 15 years, 20% of our population is going to be over age 65. We've never faced that in America. It seems to me that there's going to be an inevitable crisis in long-term care.
It's going to be a tsunami of crisis in care. 10,000 of us are turning 65 every day, Chris. And, you know, part of the Affordable Care Act included what was called Title VIII, which was the long-term care component. That went into effect in October of 2011. In January of 2012, the government took it out of the Affordable Care Act, and in their own words, they said that the need will be so great and the financial cost will not be sustainable. And that's the government saying they can't pay for this. It's too much.
Well, George,
think about that.
Yes, thank you very much for being on the Best Times, helping us to prepare for long-term care.
It's my pleasure.